Previously in the complete creation.
The American Journal of Science and Arts in 1822 documented the first case. The workmen engaged in blasting rock from the bed of the Erie Canal at Lockport in Niagara County lately discovered in a small cavity in the rock a toad in the torpid state, which on exposure to the air instantly came to life but died in a few moments afterwards. The cavity was only large enough to contain the body without allowing room for motion. To the surface was 6 inches through solid stone. Welcome back to part 25 of this series. Getting close to the end, but I think I'm going to be tacking on another 4 parts to the series, possibly 6 more. We'll see how it goes. Today we're going to delve into a topic dear to my heart, and which is, as my good friend Dr. Carl Baugh put it, a lightning rod for controversy. Now, while I have conducted my own personal research into the topic for decades now, and I've had the great privilege of making a few discoveries myself, I am truly standing on the shoulders of giants on this topic. Dr. Carl Baugh, the late Professor Emeritus M.E. Clark, and David Lyons, all at the Creation Evidence Museum, and Dr. Don Patton, all of whom have spent decades in first-hand excavations and explorations of the Paluxy River in particular in Glen, Texas. But their research has literally carried them all around the globe as well. According to various polls taken over the years, the majority of people believe that dinosaurs and humans lived contemporaneously. They also lived at the same time. So how would the Bible answer that question of people and dinosaurs living at the same time? How would evolutionism answer? And finally, what does the evidence show? Now, according to Genesis chapter 1, all of the land animals and sea creatures were created on days 5 and 6 of the creation week. Land animals would obviously include the dinosaurs, and sea creatures would obviously include what many people consider the dinosaurs of the ocean: Mosasaurus, Plesiosaurus, etc. Man was also created on day 6. Therefore, biblically speaking, man and dinosaur did live at the same time. In extreme contrast, the evolutionism model would claim that dinosaurs became extinct at least 60 million years before humans ever evolved. Let's go to the experts in evolutionism to see the extreme contrast between the models of creation and evolution. In a following lecture, we will look at the downright scandalous treatment of the fossil human footprints found in Carboniferous rocks near Berea, Kentucky. Carboniferous, so about here on the evolutionary column, and some 300 million years before humans were supposed to have evolved. Albert G. Ingalls, writing in Scientific American magazine in January of 1940, wrote, "If man, or even his ape ancestor, or even that ape ancestor's early mammalian ancestor, existed as far back as in the Carboniferous period in any shape, then the whole science of geology is so wrong that all the geologists will resign their jobs and take up truck driving. Hence, for the present at least, science rejects the attractive explanation that man made these mysterious prints in the mud of the Carboniferous period with his feet." There are so many logical fallacies just in these 2 sentences that it's difficult to know where to begin. For the moment, please notice that Ingalls has pulled a bait and switch. It is not the science of geology that's wrong, but deep time and evolutionism. I will deal with Ingalls' bad, even deceitful science later, but for now, I wish to focus on where he and I can agree. He is absolutely right. If those are truly fossil human footprints, then deep time advocates should resign their jobs and take up truck driving, because deep time has just gotten deep sixed. Famed author and atheist professor Richard Dawkins spelled out the implications of out-of-place fossils and even mentioned the Paluxy fossil footprints in his book, The Blind Watchmaker. Nevertheless, however small the proportion fossilized, there are certain things about the fossil record that any evolutionist should expect to be true. We should be very surprised, for example, to find fossil humans appearing in the record before mammals are supposed to have evolved. If a single, well-verified mammal skull were to turn up in 500 million-year-old rocks, our whole modern theory of evolution would be utterly destroyed. Incidentally, this is a sufficient answer to the canard put about by creationists and their journalistic fellow travelers that the whole theory of evolution is an unfalsifiable tautology. Ironically, it is also the reason why creationists are so keen on the fake human footprints which were carved during the Depression to fool tourists in the dinosaur beds of Texas. Oh, Richard. Your naivety and ignorance is so quaint. We will respond to Dr. Dawkins' foolish and baseless remarks about the Texas tracks, but for the moment, I will focus on that to which we agree. Finding evidence of humans at the time of the dinosaurs would falsify the theory of evolution. Stephen M. Stanley also acknowledged how out-of-place fossils held destructive power over evolutionism. There is an infinite variety of ways in which, since 1859, the general concept of evolution might have been demolished. Consider the fossil record, a little-known resource in Darwin's day. Any topsy-turvy sequence of fossils would force us to rethink our theory, yet not a single one has come to light. As Darwin recognized, a single geographic inconsistency would have nearly the same power of destruction. Correction! The number of topsy-turvy fossil sequences is too many to number. You have systematically ignored them, swept them under the rug, or you and your evolutionary peers have mocked and ridiculed the findings in what can only be described as bizarre anti-science behavior. Nevertheless, I will focus on where we can agree. Evidence of humans among the dinosaurs would demolish evolution and the evolutionary column. Louis Jacobs, former president of the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology, did not mince his words in acknowledging the significance of finding human fossils among the dinosaurs. Co-occurrence of men and dinosaurs. Such an association would dispel an Earth with vast antiquity. The entire history of creation, including the Day of Rest, could be accommodated in the 7 biblical days of the Genesis myth. Evolution would be vanquished. Translation: finding man and dinosaur together would mean 3 things. The Earth is young, the history of the Genesis account of creation would be true, and evolution would be falsified. He said it, not me. I'm just agreeing with him. So, 3 points, each of which is significant. Finding man and dinosaur together would mean the Earth is young, the history of the Genesis account of creation would be true, and evolution would be falsified. So, with both evolutionists and creationists agreeing on the significance of the evidence and just exactly what it would mean in the origins debate, just what is the evidence? Well, let's take a look. I'm going to start with Glen, Texas, as it is the hottest spot for such evidence, though by no means is it the only one. I've personally visited and documented 6 different locations in the US and Canada that had alleged fossil human footprints, and another 3 locations that were claimed to have fossil human footprints, but in my research I determined that they were not fossil human footprints. First, just where is Glen? It's in central Texas, south of Dallas-Fort Worth, about an hour's drive. The Paluxy River winds through the town, emptying into the Brazos River. And all of these rivers cut through that Austin chalk we discussed in part 4 of this series. I've spent hundreds of hours in first-hand excavations in the Paluxy and hundreds of hours wading in, studying, and documenting miles and miles of rock layers exposed in the riverbed. There are so many dinosaur tracks that Dinosaur Valley State Park was created here, where people can go and look at the dinosaur tracks in the riverbed. Here's Creation Evidence Museum, built on the shores of the Paluxy River, where the museum director had such a profound, life-changing experience excavating fossil human footprints among the dinosaur tracks that he moved to Glen and built the museum. Every year, they host public excavations in the Paluxy that you can attend and see for yourself in hopes of excavating fossil dinosaur tracks and hopefully fossil human tracks as well. Now, this one stretch of river I fondly refer to as Paluxy Prime. It is only about 1 kilometer long, yet in that short stretch, there has been well over 1,000 dinosaur tracks uncovered, either by erosion or excavation, and over 100 fossil human footprints. These are some of the more important trails and sites of fossil human footprints, and the sheer numbers of fossil footprints of all kinds are staggering. Just downstream is the state park, and multiple fossil human footprints have been uncovered there as well, primarily on what is called the Park Ledge, right here. We'll take a close look at several of the tracks from that ledge, several of which are still there today that you can go and see for yourself. The blue hole is exactly what it sounds like. It's a swimming hole in the river. That's a major landmark that everybody references. That location will come up later on in reference to the Willett track in particular. Farther downstream is another stretch which has given up multiple dinosaur tracks as well as many fossil human footprints. This is the stretch where Cecil Dougherty documented a huge treasure trove of fossil trackways. By his estimation, he counted 40 human footprints and 100 dinosaur tracks in one relatively small patch. So just upstream from here, local resident and Paluxy researcher Aaron Judkins and myself were prospecting in 2008 when we found a dinosaur trample site in a layer that we were not aware of having previously been identified as containing dinosaur tracks. It was just like the dinosaur trample site I studied in British Columbia, Canada, and here in the Paluxy, there were so many dinosaur tracks stepping on top of each other that it was difficult to distinguish individual tracks. And we documented what appears to be a tail impression of one dinosaur and the largest tridactyl dinosaur tracks that I had ever personally seen. You can see the 1 foot long ruler for scale. In town, immediately to the north of the Highway 144 bridge, Dougherty also found a short trail of 3 human footprints in stride in the riverbed, and others have been found in that stretch. Down here, this tributary of the Paluxy River is a creek called Cross Branch, and it is a very important site as we can identify that site as being the source of multiple fossil footprints, including this man track and this cat track. I'll explain in detail shortly, but for the moment, that is the precise location of where these tracks came from. The Paluxy River and Brazos River, into which the Paluxy empties, are both unusual rivers in that they are the steepest and fastest flowing rivers possibly in the continental US. The Paluxy is normally a trickle, but water pools, and as a result, most of the tracks at Paluxy Prime are typically underwater. However, when it rains, look out. I have seen that river rise 20 feet or 6 meters in one rainfall in just a few hours. To give you an idea, this footage is only a rise in the river of maybe 6 feet. The Paluxy flash floods are the most unbelievable sight that I've been able to behold twice, and I have literally never seen anything like it. Even the flash floods of the American Southwest deserts, do not compare to the Paluxy River flash floods. When these flash floods occur in the Paluxy, both the volume of water combined with its incredible speed will rip up entire sheets of rock a foot thick from the riverbed and move them around or destroy them like they are nothing. Thus, for the past century, occasional flash floods have revealed trails of both dinosaur tracks and human tracks. Researchers would sometimes follow those trails as they went under a rock ledge, or they would excavate them at random locations, hunting for fossil tracks. This is exceedingly difficult as the track layer is underneath a limestone layer, typically 6 to 12 inches thick, which needs to be broken up by sledgehammers and chisels or jackhammers and heavy equipment. Furthermore, there is a hard pan clay layer on top of the main track layer, which also needs to be removed. So you can quickly see the ridiculousness of the claim that the Paluxy human footprints are only a couple of scattered examples and they are all carvings. The fossil human tracks number in the hundreds, and the vast majority of those prints were excavated from underneath undisturbed solid rock in the presence of multiple eyewitnesses, as it took entire teams of people to perform these excavations. So if anybody tries to tell you that the Paluxy human footprints are just a very few carved tracks, you can immediately write them off as incredibly ignorant on the topic or being downright deceitful. Yes, there were a few carved tracks of both dinosaur and human, which were carved by locals during the Depression in order to sell them. Here's one here. But these carvings are, first of all exceedingly rare. And it brings up the question, why did the carvers do this? Stop and think about this for a moment, because there's a profound point here that I think everyone is overlooking. If you were to go back in time and confront one of these track carvers and ask them, why did you carve these tracks, and try to pawn them off as fossils from the riverbed? Well, it's very odd, unless you take into account that it's because fossil dinosaur tracks and fossil human tracks were common in the riverbed. They were only carving replicas of what everybody was already seeing in the riverbed. Approach the tourists fresh out of the river and say, hey, you know those fossil human footprints you saw in the river? Look, I've got one right here I removed from the riverbed that you can buy. Take Open's genuine Paluxy fossil human footprint, just like all the other ones you saw in the riverbed. In fact, one of the reasons carved tracks were so rare was because for the amount of effort it took to fetch a rock from the river and carve a fake track, it was the same amount of work or less work to just go prospecting in the river, find genuine fossil tracks in the riverbed, and cut them out of the riverbed. All of these maps I showed you with copious numbers of human tracks are what we know of, and most of those tracks are still there today. Texas law now forbids the removal of tracks from the riverbed, so the tracks have to remain in the river to be slowly destroyed over time by weather and the river. Before we look at the actual evidence, let us ask a question. Is it possible to identify a creature by its footprint? The answer is an emphatic, definite, absolute yes. Even children, just based on their life experience, can identify the footprints of a dog or cat, even more so a human's footprint. There are expert trackers who can not only identify a creature by its footprint, they can routinely tell you what the creature was doing at that particular moment in time. Expert trackers can distinguish between male and female human footprints. So yes, you can positively identify an animal, and humans in particular, by their footprints, especially because humans have a unique foot. Apes, for example, don't have feet like us. They basically have 4 hands. Their big toe diverges from the foot, much like the thumb on our hands. So human footprints can take on a variety of forms and can even look very unhuman at times. All of these footprints are from the same trail of footprints made in concrete. In most of the tracks, the toes are quite evident, yet in others, the toe impressions are completely absent. This brings home the importance of a trail, a sequence of footprints, so you can compare the stride and movement of the tracks to human stride and movement. Obviously, if we have a trail of human footprints in stride and in a right-left-right sequence, and some of those tracks have toe impressions while others do not, we don't assume the toes fell off the person's foot while making the trail. It just means the toe impressions weren't preserved in that particular track. Sometimes the footprints being made preserve spectacular details in the mud. The human footprints in the Paluxy are found in the same layer as the dinosaur tracks, sometimes in layers below the main dinosaur track layer. The human footprints are found stepping beside the dinosaur tracks, like this one, which is one of the tracks in a sequence of 12 right, left, right footprints, some of which have toe impressions preserved, therefore clearly human. Sometimes the dinosaur tracks step on top of the freshly made human footprint while the mud was still soft, thus obliterating part of the human footprint. This was another human footprint in the same trail, the Baugh trail, and the toe impressions from the human foot was preserved in solid stone, all excavated from underneath 8 inches of undisturbed limestone. The dinosaur track was part of a trail heading in the opposite direction, and the heel of the dinosaur obliterated part of the heel in the human footprint. Obviously, it had to have happened within an hour or two of the human footprint being made, as the mud had not yet hardened into rock. All this rock is limestone, from where we get concrete. So it sets up very much like concrete. How long do you have to make footprints in wet concrete? That gives you an idea of the time frame in which all of these tracks need to be made. The dinosaur tracks take on a variety of shapes, including some very, very strange tracks that I've encountered in at least one other location. We'll get into that later. But many of the dinosaur tracks are elephant-like from the sauropods. Others are like this one in the Delk track slab. It looks just like a giant chicken track. Why did the chicken cross the road? I don't know. You can ask him, because I sure ain't going to question his actions. But what you may not have noticed is that there is also a human footprint in the slab. All 5 toes are preserved. The ball, the arch, the heel, it is a pristine footprint. Yes, the big toe is bent down in an unusual way, but there's 2 possible reasons for that. There is a common foot disorder that does this called hallux varus. Teno Groppi from Genesis Evidence Ministries has his own traveling creation museum as well, and he had some of my casts on loan for a time. While he had my cast of the Delk track, I asked him to kindly photograph his foot in the Delk human track so I could share the photo in a debate I was having online at the time. Little did I know, Teno had hallux varus. It was only affecting his little toe, but this goes to show you that it is surprisingly common in how this can have an unusual effect on a footprint made by a human. Another possibility is that the big toe simply got hooked in the soft mud during forward locomotion. I will tell you this, the toenail of the big toe actually left an impression in the hole made by the big toe, as can be seen if you look into the hole, and also in this latex mold I made in the toe impression. The bulbous front of the toe with the impression of the toenail digging into the mud, and then when the toe was pulled out in an upwards direction, it squished up the mud up and forward. But coming back to the human and dinosaur tracks, notice that the dinosaur's middle toe clipped the arch of the human footprint and displaced mud, pushing up a crest of the mud into the human footprint. So the human stepped in the limestone mud before the dinosaur came along and stepped in the mud, clipping the freshly made human footprint with its middle toe. One could argue that in this case, humans appeared in the fossil record before the dinosaurs. Alas, I am out of time for this segment. In the next lecture, we're going to dissect multiple trails of fossil human footprints so you can see the powerful evidence for yourself. And then we will look at the tracks using a new diagnostic technique, which the team at Creation Evidence Museum have been developing to not only test loose tracks, but to also extract further information from the individual impressions to be able to interpret stride and motion during the making of the footprints. I hope you'll continue on with me in this journey.
Coming up in the next Complete Creation.
One of the most powerful things one can do scientifically is to make a prediction. So, Doctors Baugh and Patton made a prediction. The evidence wasn't lining up. There was a track missing from the trail of human footprints. So, based on the stride of the footprints in the trail before and after, they predicted the area where the missing footprint should be, and they blasted that area with a fire hose. This dislodged that hard pan clay I mentioned previously, revealing one of the single most spectacular in situ fossil footprints ever to be uncovered, right smack dab in the middle of a dinosaur track. The ball, the arch, the heel, all 5 toes are present. In fact, the second toe is exhibiting a clearly human trait. Your second toe is the most sensitive of all your toes. When walking barefoot under certain circumstances, you instinctively raise that toe. That is exactly what we see in this track. The second toe has been slightly raised, leaving a lighter impression than the other toes.
You can catch the entire series in a variety of ways. You can watch the show online at www.completecreation.org or www.genesisweek.com. You can also purchase the Complete Creation series in full high definition on Blu-ray or video on demand at completecreation.org. Or support the Miracle Channel with a monthly tax-deductible donation and access the entire Complete Creation series in high definition through Corco, Miracle Channel's video on demand service. We need your support to keep this program on the air. So please pray for us. And if you wish to financially support the program, Canadians can make a tax-deductible donation to Core Ottawa, Canada North Post Office Box 72075, Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, K2K2P4. Or you can make a donation via PayPal online at ianjuby.org/donations. And thank you for your support.